Welcome to our video exploring the fascinating world of Pokemon and their placement on the Tree of Life. Today, we take a closer look at Aerodactyl and its connection to all dinosaur Pokemon. Ready? Let's go! The Ornithodira are a major clade of archosaurs. They constitute a so-called node-based taxon, defined as the clade that includes the last common ancestor of pterosaurs and dinosaurs, and all of its descendants, including modern birds. The name Ornithodira is derived from the Greek prefix ornitho, relating to birds, and the word dheri, dere, meaning neck. It refers to a characteristic feature of this group, the S-shaped curvature of the cervical vertebrae, a trait still typical of birds today. The term was coined by Jacques Gauthier in 1986. The unification of pterosaurs, dinosaurs, and several additional taxa into a single group is based not only on the S-shaped neck, but also on the distinctive structure of the ankle joint. In Ornithodira, the joint lies between the upper, more proximal tarsal bones, astragalus and calcaneum, and the lower, more distal tarsal bones, tarsalia distalia. This configuration is known as a mesotarsal joint, mid-tarsal articulation. Combined with elongated toe bones, it enabled a digitigrade posture, walking on the toes. Ornithodira are contrasted with their sister group, the Crurotarsi, which includes several extinct taxa such as phytosaurs as well as modern crocodilians. In Crurotarsi, the ankle joint lies between the astragalus and calcaneum, causing these animals to place the entire sole of the foot on the ground. Unlike Crurotarsians and modern crocodiles, Ornithodirans generally lack bony plates embedded in the skin of the back, dorsal osteoderms, with only a few dinosaur groups as exceptions. A controversy in the 1990s over whether the compsognathid dinosaur Sinosauropteryx was feathered led to the realization that feathers were widespread among non-avian dinosaurs. Not only theropods, but also ornithischians possessed a variety of feather types, many of which correspond to those found in theropods. This suggested that feathers may have originated in the Triassic before the emergence of dinosaurs. Around 2020, reports on new pterosaur fossils showed that these flying reptiles also possessed several simple feather types, all corresponding to those known from birds and dinosaurs. This reinforced the conclusion that feathers are a body-covering characteristic shared by all Ornithodira. Because the genus Scleromochlus, long considered a basal pterosaur relative, has been placed outside Ornithodira in recent analyses. Ornithodira are no longer regarded as the sister group of Crurotarsi, but instead as the sister group of Scleromochlus. Pterosaurs, Pterosauria, are extinct reptiles that lived roughly contemporaneously with non-avian dinosaurs and, like dinosaurs, belong to the Ornithodira within Archosauria. With their large, wing-like flight membranes, they were the first vertebrates capable of powered flight. Birds and bats evolved flight later and independently. The earliest pterosaur fossils date back to the early late Triassic, Carnian, about 228 million years ago. They persisted until the mass extinction at the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, around 66 million years ago. Classically, two major types of pterosaurs were distinguished. The so-called long-tailed pterosaurs, traditionally grouped as Rhamphorhynchoidea, possessed long tails and relatively short metacarpal bones. These were the earliest pterosaurs and disappeared by the late Jurassic. In contrast, the short-tailed pterosaurs, known as Pterodactyloidea, had either a very short tail or none at all and featured elongated metacarpals. They first appeared in the Middle Jurassic and survived until the end of the Cretaceous. This traditional division is no longer used in modern taxonomy. Phylogenetic analyses have shown that short-tailed pterosaurs evolved from long-tailed ancestors, meaning that Rhamphorhynchoidea represents a paraphyletic group rather than a true evolutionary lineage. A central question in pterosaur biology concerns their flight capabilities. It is generally accepted that smaller pterosaurs were capable of highly active, powered flight. In contrast, the giant pterosaurs of the Cretaceous were likely specialized soarers. Like modern birds of prey, they probably relied on thermal updrafts, and like albatrosses, some may have practiced dynamic soaring, using wind gradients above ocean waves to travel long distances with minimal energy expenditure. Their frequent association with marine environments and the high aspect ratio of their wings support this interpretation. Even so, these animals must still have been capable of active takeoff, including from the water. Because powered flight is energetically demanding, pterosaurs are often assumed to have been warm-blooded and covered, at least partially, in hair-like filaments. Evidence supporting this idea includes fossils such as Sordus pilosus, the hairy devil, and filamentous impressions preserved in specimens from the Solnhofen limestone and the Posidonia shale of Holzmaden. However, in a 2020 study, British paleontologists David M. Martill and David Unwin challenged this interpretation, arguing that these structures are not hairs or protofeathers, but instead represent structural fibers from the wing membranes. Another long-standing debate concerns how pterosaurs moved on land. Their hind limbs were relatively small, raising questions about terrestrial locomotion. Kevin Padian and Jeremy Rayner proposed that pterosaurs walked bipedally, similar to modern birds, based on similarities in limb construction. In contrast, David Unwin and Peter Wellenhofer argued for quadrupedal locomotion, with pterosaurs using both their forelimbs and hind limbs, folding the wing finger backward in a manner comparable to modern vampire bats. This quadrupedal model is currently favored, supported by studies of pelvic anatomy in genera such as Anhanguera and Campylognathioides, which suggest that the hind limbs could not be positioned vertically beneath the body. Large pterosaurs in particular would have been extremely awkward if restricted to bipedal movement. It is also possible that different pterosaur species employed different strategies. Smaller, early long-tailed forms may well have stood or moved bipedally, whereas the enormous pterodactyloids of the late Cretaceous almost certainly relied on quadrupedal locomotion. Pterosaurs were likely universally carnivorous. Early long-tailed species primarily hunted invertebrates, but later pterosaurs diversified into a wide range of ecological roles. Some specialized in catching fish, while others preyed on terrestrial vertebrates. Dimorphodon likely hunted vertebrates. Ostreodactylus fed on hard-shelled invertebrates. Rhamphorhynchus and Coloborhynchus were fish eaters, and Pterodactylus consumed a variety of invertebrate prey. One of the most unusual pterosaurs, Pterodastro from South America, possessed extremely long and slender teeth forming a sieve-like structure. This animal filtered seawater to feed on plankton, much like modern flamingos. Although most known pterosaur fossils come from coastal or aquatic environments, it is now widely accepted that many species also lived inland, in forests, mountainous regions, and even deserts. Their apparent absence from these habitats in the fossil record is best explained by poor fossilization conditions and the extremely thin, fragile nature of pterosaur bones. Pterosaurs, like all archosaurs, were egg-laying animals. A fossil embryo from the early Cretaceous, about 121 million years old, discovered in 2004 in China's Liaoning province, provides striking evidence of this. The egg, slightly smaller than a chicken egg, contained a well-preserved skeleton, along with impressions of skin and wing tissue. The embryo, which was probably close to hatching, already had a wingspan of 27 centimeters. The discoverers interpret this as an indication that pterosaur hatchlings were likely precocial, capable of flight shortly after hatching, and able to feed independently of their parents. The idea that pterosaurs lived in colonies is based primarily on theoretical considerations and on a discovery in the Atacama Desert in Chile, where a large number of juvenile pterosaur remains were found in a very small area. The most striking feature of pterosaurs is their forelimbs, which were transformed into large wings that enabled both gliding and powered flight. The wing membrane stretched between the body and the arm, supported by the greatly elongated fourth finger, which corresponds to the human ring finger. The other three fingers bore claws outside the wing membrane, and the fifth finger was absent. The wing bones of pterosaurs were typically hollow and very thin-walled. They contained many air-filled spaces to keep the bones lightweight. Struts of bone reinforced the ends of the larger bones. For this reason, pterosaur wing bones are usually found only as fragments. Intact bones are extremely rare. The wing bones of the two major pterosaur groups differ markedly. In long-tailed pterosaurs, the wing consists of a relatively short humerus and a relatively short metacarpal. The four phalanges of the wing finger, however, are quite long. The claws are also attached to very short metacarpals. As in all terrestrial vertebrates, the forearm consists of two bones, with the ulna being slightly longer than the radius. In cross-section, most shafts are oval, becoming heart-shaped toward the ends. In contrast, short-tailed pterosaurs have a more massive and longer humerus and ulna. The radius is equally long but less robust. Their metacarpals are much longer than those of earlier pterosaurs, while the finger bones are proportionally shorter. Short-tailed pterosaurs also typically had 4 phalanges in the wing finger. The claws are well developed and also sit on elongated metacarpals. The bone walls are thinner than in long-tailed forms and thicken toward the ends. The cross-section is hollow and triangular, becoming oval toward the tips. These features are especially pronounced in the very large species. The wings themselves consisted of a membrane reinforced by closely spaced fibers known as actinofibrils, which provided both structural stability and tear resistance. These structures have been studied in well-preserved wing membranes from several pterosaurs of the Santana Formation. The vertebral column of pterosaurs differs significantly from that of earlier reptiles and is adapted to a flying lifestyle and the associated demands placed on the axial skeleton. In several respects, the pterosaur vertebral column closely resembled that of birds, a case of convergence, featuring a pronounced shoulder region and a massive pelvic region. The back was very short, and therefore allowed only limited movement. The longest section was the cervical spine, which explains why most isolated vertebrae found are neck vertebra. Compared with other vertebrates, the cervical spine was exceptionally long. Early pterosaurs possessed 8 cervical vertebrae, whereas some of the larger later forms reduced this number to 6. The first 2 vertebrae of the neck, the atlas and axis, were usually fused into a single bone. These cervical vertebrae had very thin walls, and their interiors consisted of a spongy lattice of bone with large air-filled spaces. Cervical ribs were generally absent. The thoracic spine consisted of up to 12 vertebrae, though most species had fewer. The anterior thoracic vertebrae were often fused into a massive shoulder structure to which the scapulae attached. In some species, this formed a long compound bone spanning 6 to 8 vertebrae. Behind this, the dorsal spine consisted of about 6 vertebrae and was very short but compact. Like the other vertebrae, these bones were filled with a bony lattice, but they also featured a large lateral opening that pierced the bone completely. Most species possessed short gastralia, or belly ribs, associated with this region. The sacral or lumbar region was typically fused into a single massive bone that articulated tightly with the pelvic girdle. In early long-tailed pterosaurs, this structure was still relatively loose, but in short-tailed pterosaurs it formed a solid pelvic unit. This region usually incorporated 6 to 8 vertebrae. The tail of long-tailed pterosaurs was extremely long and could consist of more than 35 caudal vertebrae. Some fossils show a vein at the end of the tail, which likely functioned in steering and stabilization during flight. In short-tailed pterosaurs, the number of tail vertebrae was greatly reduced. The skull of pterosaurs, like much of their skeleton, shows a bird-like appearance, mainly due to numerous openings and reductions that reduced weight. A major difference from birds, however, lies in their dentition, which was especially well developed in early pterosaurs. The most robust and therefore most commonly preserved parts of the skull are the tips of the jaws and the jaw joint at the quadrate bone. A distinctive feature of pterosaur skulls is a ring of bony plates surrounding the eye. The exact biological function of this structure remains uncertain, but it may have served to stabilize the eye or regulate pressure. Like all archosaurs, pterosaurs possessed an additional skull opening in front of the eye, the preorbital fenestra, while the temporal opening was reduced. Many short-tailed pterosaurs bore tall and elongated cranial crests. These may have functioned in visual display, acoustic amplification, or flight stabilization, depending on interpretation. Teeth are frequently preserved in pterosaur fossils, although several late Cretaceous species had no teeth or only very small ones. The earliest pterosaurs possessed multicusp teeth, typically with 3 cusps. In later forms, such as Rhamphorhynchus, these were replaced by long, pointed teeth that projected beyond the margin of the jaws. Some long-tailed pterosaurs, however, lacked teeth entirely. During the late Jurassic, pterosaurs showed a clear trend toward tooth reduction. Some species retained teeth only at the front of the jaws, while others lost them completely, resulting in beak-like jaws. The large pterosaurs of the late Cretaceous were uniformly toothless. Like dinosaurs, pterosaurs were among the groups of animals that inspired enormous fascination upon their initial discovery. Fossils of pterosaurs rank among the earliest known remains of terrestrial vertebrates and were therefore studied at the very beginning of paleontological research in the early 19th century. The first scientific description of a pterosaur was published in 1784 by Cosimo Alessandro Collini. Soon afterward, exceptionally well-preserved fossils from southern England and Germany brought pterosaurs to wide attention, not only within scientific circles, but also among the general public. Among the earliest and most influential discoveries was Dimorphodon macronix, found by Mary Anning in the Blue Lias Formation near Lyme Regis. From the late Jurassic Solnhofen limestone of Germany came iconic forms such as Rhamphorhynchus and Pterodactylus. These spectacular fossils led pterosaurs to be described as the most wondrous creatures of the prehistoric world. In 1831, the German naturalist Georg August Goldfuss famously remarked that these animals appeared as though they had sprung more from imagination than from nature. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the number of known pterosaur fossils steadily increased, revealing an unexpectedly diverse group. The Solnhofen and Eichstätt lithographic limestones proved especially rich. In 1839, the exceptionally well-preserved Rhamphorhynchus longicephalus was discovered there, the first pterosaur fossil to preserve a complete, elongated tail. Remarkably, short-tailed pterosaurs were found in the same deposits, showing that both forms lived side by side. In England, the Wealden Formation yielded numerous pterosaur remains. Gideon Mantell initially interpreted these fossils as birds in a series of publications between 1822 and 1837. It was Richard Owen who correctly identified them as pterosaurs in 1846, and later Harry Seeley assigned many of these remains to the genus Ornithocaris. In 1870, Othniel Charles Marsh discovered fossils of the giant Pteranodon in Kansas, marking the first pterosaur skeleton found in North America. In 1895, Felix Planninger formally divided pterosaurs into long-tailed and short-tailed forms, a classification that remained influential until phylogenetic studies over the past 2 decades fundamentally revised pterosaur systematics. Throughout the 20th century, fossil discoveries continued to expand both the known diversity and the global distribution of pterosaurs. In addition to classic European localities, highly productive sites are now known from the Santana Formation of Brazil, Paki in Senegal, and several regions of northern China. The oldest known pterosaurs date back to the late Triassic, around 228 million years ago. From this early period, however, fossils are typically fragmentary, with complete skulls or articulated skeletons being extremely rare. Early species are often identified by their distinctive teeth, which commonly bear multiple cusps. In later pterosaurs, these were replaced by elongated, single-cusp teeth. Early pterosaurs also had more robust bones, with thicker outer walls and fewer internal air spaces. All known pterosaurs from the Triassic and early Jurassic possessed long tails, and many early forms had exceptionally long pointed teeth, such as Rhamphorhynchus from the Solnhofen limestone. One of the best-preserved early pterosaur skeletons is Eudomorphodon ranzi, discovered in limestone deposits near Sini, north of the Italian city of Bergamo. Remarkably, fish scales were found in the stomach region of this specimen, providing direct evidence that it fed on fish. The family Eudomorphodontidae played a crucial role in the early evolution of pterosaurs. From this group, the first representatives of the Dimorphodontidae and Rhamphorhynchidae emerged already during the Triassic. While these latter groups persisted into the Jurassic, the Eudomorphodontidae disappeared by the end of the Triassic. Most Triassic pterosaur fossils, and many of the most complete specimens, come from Italy, particularly from the Zorzino limestone near Sene in Lombardy, and from the Prioni Valley in the Alps. During the Jurassic, pterosaurs underwent major evolutionary transformations. They spread across the globe, occupied a wide range of ecological niches, and diversified into numerous forms. The long-tailed pterosaurs of this period typically bore elongated teeth that tapered sharply toward the tip, reflecting increasingly specialized feeding strategies. In some species, the teeth were serrated, though most had smooth teeth. The long-tailed pterosaurs disappeared around the middle of the Jurassic. They were replaced by the short-tailed pterosaurs, or Pterodactyloidea, which evolved from a subgroup of the long-tailed forms early in the Jurassic. These pterosaurs had greatly reduced tails and show, over the course of their evolution, a shortening of the teeth and a lengthening of the metacarpals of the wing-bearing finger. Over the Jurassic, pterosaurs developed into a highly successful group of vertebrates. In the early and middle Jurassic, additional long-tailed taxa evolved exclusively from the Triassic families Dimorphodontidae and Rhamphorhynchidae, among them the Scaphognathinae, Campylornithoides, and the Rhamphocephalidae. Only in the late Jurassic did the tailless, short-tailed pterosaurs, especially the Pterodactylidae, become dominant. At this time, pterosaurs reached their greatest overall species diversity, inhabiting a wide range of environments across the world. One of the richest Jurassic pterosaur deposits is the Solnhofen-Eichstätt lithographic limestone, which also yielded the famous early bird Archaeopteryx. Fossilization conditions in this material are exceptionally good, allowing even wing membranes and soft tissue impressions to be preserved. Among the finds from these limestones are skeletons of Rhamphorhynchus and Pterodactylus. Another excellent Jurassic locality is the Karatau Mountains in Kazakhstan, where the apparently hairy Sortes pilosus with preserved wing membranes was discovered. In the Cretaceous, the largest pterosaur forms evolved, at the same time that giant dinosaurs and other large marine reptiles, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, ichthyosaurs, appeared. As noted earlier, all of these Cretaceous pterosaurs belonged to the short-tailed group. The giant pterosaurs were found worldwide, though smaller forms continued to exist as well. These smaller pterosaurs were likely in direct competition with the newly evolving birds, which were rapidly diversifying at the time. Until the 1970s, Pteranodon from North America was considered the largest pterosaur, with a wingspan of about 8 meters. It was surpassed by the discovery of Quetzalcoatlus, named after the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl, often depicted as a feathered serpent, which may have reached a wingspan of up to 12 meters, based on skull measurements and comparison with other pterosaurs. A pterosaur of similar size was Hatzegopteryx from the late Cretaceous of Europe. Its skeletal fragments, discovered in the Hatzeg Basin of Romania, were only identified as belonging to a pterosaur in the late 1990s. A very important Upper Cretaceous pterosaur locality is the Araripe Basin in Brazil, especially the Crato and Santana formations. This region has yielded a wide variety of pterosaurs, including Anhanguera, Cryorhynchus, Ornithocaris, Tapejara, Thalassodromius, Ludodactylus, and Tupuxuara. Another significant Cretaceous pterosaur site is Xinjiang in China, which has also produced important dinosaur fossils, including several feathered dinosaurs and mammal fossils, such as Hadrocodium wui. Among the pterosaurs from this region are Zungaripterus wei and Noripterus complicitans, both notable for their powerful jaws. As in Solnhofen and the Crato Formation, the finds from the G-Hole group in Liaoning are characterized by exceptional soft tissue preservation. The species discovered in China resemble those from both Solnhofen and Brazil. The material found so far suggests a diversity comparable to, if not greater than, that of those classic localities. The Niobrara chalk and other formations in Texas and Kansas are also considered rich pterosaur regions. Some of the largest known pterosaurs, such as Pteranodon ingens and Quetzalcoatlus, were discovered there. The bones of these animals are often extremely fragile and are frequently found widely scattered. A pterosaur-bearing locality that has only recently been explored is the Ouled Abdoun Basin in northern Morocco, about 70 kilometers from Casablanca. The region is known for its abundant and commercially valuable phosphate deposits, which formed during the transition from the Cretaceous to the Paleogene. Within these layers, more than 200 pterosaur fragments, ranging from isolated bones to partial skeletons, have been recovered. They belong to 3 families: Pteranodontidae, Nyctosauridae, and Asdarchidae, comprising a total of 7 species. All specimens date to the late Maastrichtian, no more than 1 million years before the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. This indicates that pterosaur diversity in this region remained largely intact until the very end of the Cretaceous. Pterosaurs descended from early archosaurs, which were also the ancestors of crocodiles and dinosaurs. Because the direct fossil record of the pterosaur lineage is missing, their ancestry must be inferred through comparative anatomy. The skull provides the strongest evidence. Like other archosaurs, pterosaurs possessed a third skull opening in front of the eye, the preorbital fenestra, and the parietal foramen was reduced. Additional indicators include archosaurian tooth morphology and a reduced fifth toe. Within Archosauria, pterosaurs are generally regarded as the sister group of dinosaurs, and both are placed within the clade Ornithodira based on shared ankle morphology. However, this relationship is not strongly supported, as clear shared derived traits remain scarce. A fossil from Lossiemouth in Scotland has been proposed as the closest known relative of both pterosaurs and dinosaurs. This animal, Scleromucklus taylori, shares several anatomical features with both groups. It may be particularly informative for understanding the evolution of flight in pterosaurs, as Scleromucklus is thought to have been an excellent jumper and may even have possessed early precursors of pterosaur wing membranes. As early as 1914, Friedrich von Huenen described Scleromucklus as a parachuting animal, which had skin duplications on the forelimbs, perhaps also in other places. He suggested that it lived in trees and used them as launch points for gliding, an idea known as the arboreal hypothesis. This theory was later revisited and expanded by Michael Benton in 1999, who conducted a detailed morphological analysis and explored alternative interpretations of the animal's lifestyle. In contrast to Huene, Benton favored a hypothesis originally proposed by Woodward in 1907, that Scleromucklus was not arboreal, but a terrestrial runner with strong leaping abilities, the saltatorial hypothesis. According to this model, the first flying pterosaurs evolved from a jumping ancestor. It remains unresolved which of these hypotheses is correct, but it is noteworthy that the same competing ideas, arboreal versus terrestrial origins, have also been proposed for the evolution of flight in birds. In late 2020, small bipedal reptiles of the family Lagerpetidae from the Triassic were identified as the closest known relatives of pterosaurs. Both groups share an identically shaped inner ear, suggesting a similarly well-developed sense of balance. Phylogenetic studies conducted over the past 25 years have dissolved the classical division of pterosaurs into long-tailed and short-tailed forms. While the short-tailed pterosaurs do form a natural systematic unit, they are nested within the broader assemblage formerly grouped as long-tailed pterosaurs. Numerous families and subtaxa have been proposed, although many remain poorly defined. One such group is the Zungaripteroidea, a clade of small to large short-tailed pterosaurs that occurred worldwide during the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous. The earliest and least specialized members were small to medium-sized and are known primarily from Germanodactylus in the Solnhofen limestone, along with additional finds from Europe and East Africa. The later Zungaripteroidea form a monophyletic family, the Zungaripteridae. These pterosaurs possessed a laterally flattened beak-like jaw that was toothless at the front and slightly upturned. Robust, sharp teeth were present in the middle portion of the jaws, well suited for crushing hard-shelled prey. They likely fed on mussels and other mollusks found along rocky shorelines. Unusually for pterosaurs, their skulls, vertebrae, and limb bones were particularly sturdy. The largest representative, the Chinese genus Zungaripterus, reached a wingspan of 3 to 4 meters. That's it for now. In the next episode, we'll take a closer look at Snorlax and its surprising connection to all Mustelida Pokemon. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and check back next time as we continue exploring the Tree of Life, Pokemon Edition.